Recording in progress. Okay.
That sounded bitchy.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a couple of new people, at least one new person here. So the conceit of this meetup is that it's 1882. We have been recommended this book by a friend, and we are reading it from beginning to end. We don't know what's coming down the road because it's after 1882. We can know all about Kant, Hegel, Locke, whatever, but no references to modern analysis of Nietzsche. We are doing it as if the approaches begin with a beginner's mind, and our ideas are just as good as anybody else's. Cambry, you kind of missed my intro, so I'll do a real quick one. It's 1882. We don't know anything about modernity except our own experience, and we will not refer to critical analysis post-Nietzsche, but anything before Nietzsche or contemporary is fine. We are approaching this on our own, more or less. Okay. Where are you calling from, Cambry?
Colorado.
Oh, you may be the first Coloradoan I met. Okay.
Interesting. That's
So,
surprising.
so today's session is only going to be an hour. And so we alternate, for those of you who are new, it's 1 hour 1 week, an hour and a half the next week because of obligations that I have. So we're talking about aphorism 32 today. That's how far we've gotten so far, undesirable disciples. And I thought this was really interesting. I think this is a biographical statement. And I don't think I'm stepping out on a limb when I say that, because he calls it my doctrine. So what do you guys think of this?
How do you deal with mediocrity?
Hands up when you want to talk. David.
How do you deal with mediocrity in your circle, or in this case, in his charges, or in his students? So is he elitist? I experienced this in graduate school. The professor was complaining about all the office time he had to spend with mediocre students. Yikes. That's it.
Well,
Thank you.
So you think what? That this is about how do you deal with mediocrity? I think it's a statement of his own approach to philosophy.
Okay.
So I'm going to read the last sentence, next to the last. Supposing that they adopted my doctrine, the former, the one who couldn't say no, would suffer too much. For my way of thinking requires a warlike soul, a desire to hurt, a delight in saying no, a hard skin. So that's what I think the point of this is, to say that doesn't accept things the way they are, straightforwardly. Nicole.
I think he's talking about how to be this lone wolf in the world, meaning that if you want to be great, you have to find your own path walking alone, along with other lone wolves. Like if you want to be great, like David said, there are mediocrities. I don't think anything wrong with mediocrity, because this is a mass, right? You can't expect every single person to be great. That's just not going to happen. Otherwise, everybody going to be Nietzsche or Bertrand Russell, whatever. So it's more about how to go against the grain, not thinking about other people's things. So he's like a slowly die of open and internal wounds. I think he's prepared for other people to say things or attack him for his opinions. He's willing to die for his own faith and his own conviction. That kind of like war, like I'm ready to go on this path.
Yeah. The I don't know if you could all read this thing again. I'm going to refer once again to the quote I have above me. which is a very popular error, having the courage of one's convictions. Rather, courage is having the strength for an attack on one's convictions. And I think that's summarized in a way here. Too many of us believe things just because we haven't really thought them through. We need to challenge ourselves all the time. And I think that's what Nietzsche did in a lot of ways. Barbara.
You know, just to follow on from that, my thought about this is that it ends on the word enemies. So it does imply that there's something at stake here. There's a war on, and there are enemies. They're enemies of. So that's the question: is what he wants philosophy to do, and who would be stopping that, either in a passive way, or in a way of, you know, not really being strong enough. So it's not just a question of like his philosophy doesn't fit these types, but that in this society that he's envisioning, where the new philosopher, I guess, is going to live, it's going to take some fight to get it there. And these folks that he's describing don't have a fight.
Right. I agree with you completely. Audrey.
Well, I agree with her completely too. I also, I mean, I guess people just looked at the, did you see the note that the translator had in the Kaufman? Which I found interesting. I'm not going to try and read, I guess the Latin, but I'll read, or is it?
Wait, you're on a different one, I think. We're on 32.
Yeah, that's what I'm on. Oh, is that not the right one? No, it is. It's,
Yeah, I think it's the right
same
one.
one.
Yeah.
It's for that. It's just number 28 is the note, but it's on 32, and it says, while the translation makes the point a little clearer than the original German does, there is no doubt about Nietzsche's meaning. There is no better way to clarify that then to cite his sister as an example. First, she wanted to combine Nietzsche and Wagner half and half. Later, she changed her name to Elizabeth Foster Nietzsche and tried to fabricate a compromise between the heritage of her late husband, Bernard Forster, and who had been a leading anti-Semite, and the philosophy of her brother, who had detested Forster and anti-Semitism. So, and that is, Kaufman on the Fosters.
That's right.
So I found that interesting, and because it was right under 32, it sort of interfered with my first impression of what it was, because I read the note. And so, but I agree with both you and Barbara on that one, sure.
Okay, yeah, thanks. I'm sorry. I apologize I forgot. I couldn't see the note because I had highlighted that part. But yeah, it's a nice note because it helps to illustrate a little further what he thinks it's all about. Fred.
I think it goes beyond simply saying that we need to forge our own way and we need to strike out on our own, regardless of what may happen to us. When he says here, I'd be curious what others have to think about that. Says his doctrine, my way of thinking, of course, a warlike soul, a desire to hurt, a delight in saying no, hard skin. Notice he's saying not that his doctrine requires a willingness to be hurt. His doctrine requires a desire to hurt, which is consistent with the other passages that we read previously. So this is Nietzsche hardcore. And I think there's a tendency to often among people to interpret a kind of kinder, gentler Nietzsche, which says that, oh, the way we should take these proclamations is what he really means is simply to think for ourselves and to stand up for our own beliefs. And he goes way beyond that here. And it's like whether in the Inferno, when Virgil is leading Dante to the edge of Dis, the last circles of hell. If we take Nietzsche as our Virgil leading us down into hell, it's as if Dante said, "Oh no, this is too horrible. I'm not going to go there. I can't go that far." If we're truly, really, truly going to follow Nietzsche, then you follow him down that dark path that he leads. But we don't have to do that. On the other hand, we can draw from that lessons like think for yourself and so forth. So we can moderate Nietzsche, but we have to face up to the fact that in doing that, we are moderating Nietzsche. We're not doing everything that Nietzsche said. We're drawing back. We're saying, thank you, Nietzsche, for pointing us in that direction, but I'm not going to go with you down into hell. I'm going to just go as far as is convenient for me and then back off. That's my perspective. Thank you.
Okay. I'm thinking that this, when he says a warlike soul, a desire to hurt, a delight in saying no, a hard skin, he's talking about himself in the sense of he has a warlike soul toward himself because he wants to know. He has that desire for certainty that was brought up in Aphorism 3. And what I hear you saying is you're not going there at all.
Absolutely. For example, when he says a desire to hurt, is he saying a desire to hurt himself? I don't think so.
Yes, I'm
really?
taking it. He has a desire. He's got a yes. Because it's going to hurt if something you have held near and dear is suddenly exposed as a fraud.
Well, I think that's a kinder, gentler interpretation of Nietzsche that I don't find consistent with what he said before, what he says here, and what he'll say in other writings.
Okay. Camry.
I think that was Nietzsche, the Ubermensch. Did he write about, somebody had mentioned lone wolf, and I was thinking that he had kind of written about the ideal man and his struggles, but I'm not sure if I'm remembering that correctly.
Well, but yeah, that's the long road down, the whole path. We're really kind of at the beginning of that development.
Okay. I was trying to track with the just who the enemies were, and I also wasn't sure who did the gadfly, but it was reminiscent for me of like the enemies are just the people that I'm having to say like, hey, think about more kind of a thing, right? Like nobody wants the gadfly in their ear, but it keeps them aware and consistent.
Yeah, I think the expression "they're my enemies" is an overcharge in a way, which he's done in other things. But what I think he's saying is that people who are unwilling to examine themselves with this kind of attack are his enemies. People who advocate going along with the crowd, or who can't say no, or try to split things down the middle.
I agree. The people with unwarlike souls, ironically, are his just yeah.
I don't think he means like real war. Okay, Nicole.
Sure.
Sorry, David. I just have a response to what you said about the professors in the university. I think the professor you mentioned, that kind of type, they're the worst. Because as a teacher, they should be able to find the talents and the strength and all the merits in a student instead of criticizing them for being mediocre, right? Like, if you're not mediocre, you're not going to be a university to teach. You're going to be a philosopher yourself. Come on, right? That's not really good attitude to really encourage students. So I think that's a problem with ivory towers. Yeah.
Well, okay then. You went kind of far afield, but that's okay.
Sorry, David. I'm just saying, like, those professors.
Okay, Nathaniel.
Thanks. So I was once reading that like I hope it's okay to mention this, but whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. That kind of quote. I don't remember where he said that, but so I think people kind of, I think he's kind of getting at that notion here in a way, but it's different though than what people think. I think when people think of that quote, whatever doesn't kill you only makes you stronger, it's like you have these difficult experiences and then you survive it. But I think what Nietzsche is saying is no, it's more than that. It's you have these difficult experiences and like you're stronger from the experience. So it's not just you survive the experience. It's that no, you survived it and now you're thriving because of the experience. And that needs somebody who's very, very tough and thick-skinned and something like that. So he's appealing, I think, to people, maybe like that. So here, so thank you.
Yeah, that's okay. It's from Beyond Good and Evil, and we're going to get there eventually. Yeah, I'm okay. Jason.
Yeah, I think this aphorism is very clear to me. Okay, he talk about first. He talk about Socrates. Okay, who corrupted the youth. Okay, why this youth got corrupted? Two kind. First kind, dare not to say no. Second kind of youth got corrupted because health. Okay, so right now he keep talking. The first one is the one who suffer too much. Okay, and then doesn't have the warlike soul. So he doesn't have the hard skin. So he doesn't want to say no. Okay, always say yes. So that's why he got corrupted by Socrates, by whatever teacher. And then second kind, right? And then he said the first kind will die of open wound or internal wound because he always say yes. Turn out he got hurt internally or gradually. Second kind, okay, is say compromise, right? Make some personal compromise with every cause he present. And such a disciple, I wish my enemy. So this kind of disciple, he wish his enemy become this kind of disciple of being corrupted. So I think the overall message to me is, if you are a student, you should say no to your teacher. You should not always say yes to your teacher. You should not compromise with your teacher. You should have the hard skin. You should have courage to say no to your teacher. If you are not, I wish my enemy go to the Socrates student get corrupted, So I think that's what his message. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think he's sort of recognizing that Socrates, and Socrates comes up in the next one as well, was killed for corrupting the youth with impieties. And obviously he does not agree that that's what Socrates was doing. So I guess it's a good observation to bring that in. Barbara.
Sorry. Well, Fred has me thinking. This sounds like, you could back down and interpret this in any number of ways, and it's all good. But when you think about it, if you think that you have enemies, then you have something more than just people who don't like you. You have people who want to attack you. And it reminds me, and you have to attack back. You can't be passive or you'll lose. It reminds me of what we read last time, I believe it was last time, 28, where we were talking about the language in there as to whether or not it was about suicide. Or because it says, we may foresee the outcome that, we'll die in the process of this, of finding this new philosophy, but we don't care. Bring it. We are it's almost like that. It's a militaristic way. It's not like the soldier goes into battle to die, but he'll do it if he has to, and he knows that he might do it. And so I don't know if that you call that suicide or you call that something else, but it brings to mind that if you're going to get that hurt, it's people also going to be hurting you. And that sounds like he's saying, you have to defend against that. You have to hurt first. So I wonder, if we're making Nietzsche a little too amenable to our way of thinking by not reading this strongly enough, as Fred was suggesting.
Yeah, I still kind of think it's I think it's more the way I was suggesting. I think he's talking about having this attack on yourself. It's largely because I'm using this quote from his notes. This was never published. So I am kind of violating my own rule in that sense. But he's talking about the one student who can't say no for himself. He's going to have to go through a certain amount of internal pain and contradiction and all. And then there's the other student who does the half and half. And he's talking about the individual person and how they are approaching the world around them. And that's why I think it's a personal statement. It's not directed to where you're going to go out and beat people over the head and all that sort of stuff. You're going to do it to yourself. It's a warlike, what does he say? A warlike, whoops, where's my highlight go? A warlike soul. Anyway, I'm kind of going to stick with my interpretation. Audrey.
Well, I'm going to stick with yours too, because I think exactly that he's talking about working with yourself, like, and the hurt and the desire to hurt is, the desire to hurt threw me, I have to say. I mean, I would take caution, I guess, that you can read it the way Fred talked about, and as well as Barbara, that maybe we should at least consider it. But I really see this all as he wouldn't use these aphorisms in that way. He'd be much more straightforward, I think, if he was that way. But if he was that dark, I mean, I think he's inside in his mind, he sees things pretty darkly, and he's somehow trying to find the joy within that. And I think that the worst enemy he could think of is those people that compromise, like half and half. They just compromise what they believe to either be part of something, or because, I mean, if they have a low self-esteem and their teacher tells them one thing and they believe it, but if you're joining like a group, or this is all about philosophy. So I don't see him taking a gun and going to war. It's like, what do you want from philosophy? Let philosophy open up your mind a little bit and take a stand on what you believe and see how it works in your world. And yes, it's very possible that I'm reading it the way I like to think, but you can't prove me wrong. So, I mean, because it's philosophy, it's not science.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Yeah, I agree with you. You have to, if his method of philosophy is to examine things that are taken for granted in himself, because he's exposed to this in his society, and really take a good hard look, even at the things that he finally thinks would be convictions in a way. Cambry.
I just wanted to pop in and say, to some extent, of course, one cannot say, no, you're wrong. That's what philosophy is. But I always want to kind of jump in whenever that's mentioned and highlight that logic is such an important part of philosophy. And so if we see any contradictions, for example, I mean, one can technically say, if A, then B, therefore C kind of a situation. So it is black and white to some extent, which is the beauty of philosophy, in my opinion, is you can be wrong.
Oh, yeah. And more often than not, after reading enough Nietzsche so far, it's like you're wrong most of the time. Okay.
In terms of someone challenging and saying you're wrong, but it's for this reason. And if you can't step back and say, no, I wasn't wrong for that reason, and here's the logic behind that, then maybe you were wrong.
Yeah. I think that would be an approach, right? Okay.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I think my hands, that I
Your hand is up.
I don't agree with the
Go.
logic part at all.
Nathaniel's ahead of you, but hang on to your thought. Nathaniel.
I was going to say though, like Nietzsche, he doesn't believe in the principle of non-contradiction. So looking for Nietzsche to be like a systematic thinker in that way, you know. I think it's a bad approach often because it's not what Nietzsche was trying to do. He wasn't trying to be a systematic philosopher in that way. So I don't know. I don't think he cares that much about whether he's contradicting himself or not. So because he doesn't really believe that. So thanks.
Oh, I think I'm sorry, I wouldn't agree with you. And I'm not sure that you could state categorically that he doesn't believe in the principle of non-contradiction. You'd have to get a quote for me from material we've already read, not from anything that might have come down the road later. So, Audrey.
I just said what I said. I mean, I have nothing else to add. I just think that I agree with Nathan. Nathaniel, is that how you say your name? Yeah,
And well, I mean,
I just think that there's ways to work with philosophy without getting, bogged down in a box. I think the
Oh, yeah,
multiplicity is
sure.
too important.
Yeah, no, if that's what you meant, Nathaniel, I agree with that completely. That's what we've been exploring all along. These are novel notions. Some of them may be credible at first glance, but if you think a little deeper, work a little harder, maybe they're not so incredible. Barbara.
Well, I kind of agree. I do agree with Nathaniel. I'm not going to say that this doesn't make any sense at all, but I think that you have to look at the way the text is written and the language that gets used when it gets used and repeated, rather than try to parse out the logical system. And so he wouldn't be using aphorisms, I think, if he wanted to build a logical structure. That kind of rhetorical structure allows you a lot of latitude so that you may sound like you're contradicting yourself, but there's always time to backpedal, and there's always room in the language that he uses, as we just spent all this time on this one aphorism. As you can see, that he leaves the reader that much room. So it's really, I think, more than just the sum of its parts.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. Nietzsche, the last thing Nietzsche was a system builder, for sure. And I agree with what you said about the aphorism. That's why he's doing this. These are thought-provoking ideas that have been developed to a certain level of expression and then published. And that's kind of what we're dealing with, I think, in a lot of ways, because Nietzsche is trying to get us to think. Okay. Well, moving on. 33, outside the lecture hall. So I kind of why should man be more mistrustful and evil now? Because he now has and needs a science. So I think he's speaking, this may be part of his time in a way. I'm not sure we still feel anything like that today. But at the time, like history, the whole attack on the notion that history could be a science in the first place is sort of part of this, that this is a critical observation of the intellectual culture of his time. I don't know that it really speaks that much to us, Jason.
I think, okay, outside the lecture hall, I think the whole message is the more you learn, the more evil you become. And then that's why he said the man is the bottom one of the good nature animal. And then he talked about man is now more evil than ever before. Okay, last sentence, because he now has and need a science. So you kind of like more you learn, more you need to learn, and then you see, I think the situation is pretty universal. Okay, situation is more you learn, right? You feel like you know more. Okay, you don't know more. The more you don't know, the more you know you know less. So you want to learn more. Think about this. If we learn morality, so look like we need to learn more morality. And then does that mean we become more evil? Okay. So if we don't learn anything, we don't feel like we lack of knowledge. If we don't learn morality, we are not evil at all. So I think that's his message. Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting take on that. I hadn't thought about why those two things are in quotes, and then he's speaking for himself in just the question that he asks, and that's the answer that comes back at him. Barbara.
Yeah, I wonder if that quote is some straw man, somebody else who's talking to him, let's say, so that he can answer back. And it seems to me that in a kind of a flamboyant way, this one is talking a little bit about the previous age's reliance on religion. And now we have a reliance on science, which is a skeptical or distrustful process. And so now man is more, why should man be more evil and distrusted? Because he needs science, because he's relying now on his reason more than on dogma. Whether that statement says, I think this is good or I think this is bad, I can't tell.
Yeah, I honestly, I think that's true about so much of what he says. That's why the 32 is so interesting, because he does seem to be speaking for himself and not just tossing this thing out there to kind of spin it around a little bit and see what somebody might think about. David.
What is the association of distrust with evil? What is the connection there?
What do you think? What do you think?
I don't think there is one. Why? Just because you become distrustful of the dogma? Is that you become evil because of that?
Well, is that what you think he's saying here?
Yes. Yes,
Well,
man is now
ironic,
more
though?
evil than ever.
Is it ironic?
And
though?
I do not.
Yeah,
No?
David, turn your video off because your bandwidth doesn't have enough to get your video and your sound, so you're breaking up a lot. If you turn your video off, we'll have just audio, and it's easier to understand what you're saying. There, thank you.
Yeah, I
Audrey.
was just going to add to David that this might be ironic. I can't really tell how to read it, so his question makes a lot of sense.
Audrey.
Well, yeah. Good natured and evil more or less are opposites.
Audrey.
I thought that, am I up?
Yeah, now.
Okay, I got this feeling he was talking to an interlocutor because, and it reminded me of like Wittgenstein, you know, the way it has this interlocutor in all his little paragraphs. And so I was wondering, so he's asking himself something. And I don't really understand. To me, he's saying that we've become more evil, we've become more knowledgeable, we've become more evil because we depend on now science, the industry of science, to make our truths for us. And that's how I read it. And I don't know which side, I mean, in this one, it's hard to know what side he's on. But he's somebody saying that, or he's thinking that, and he's having a discussion with this person, with this interlocutor, of which to me is himself, you know.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. I like that.
Strange. I don't know if it's good, but it's,
Well,
but I
your
mean, like talking to yourself and he came up with one reason why they're evil, which doesn't sound like him. You know, if you think about it, I mean, there's not just one reason. That would be using his reason to come up to that. So I found it interesting and something that we were part of, you know, his own discussion right here. And it's just food for thought to
Yeah,
think. It's
yeah.
just an aphorism that we can use.
Yeah, yeah, I'm there. Camry.
Is he not referring to the Christian story of Eve? You know, the apple equals knowledge equals evil, kind of a thing. I've always taken this as him being rather facetious, or alternatively, we could say like, okay, it's wrong to steal, but what if you have starving children? Kind of a thing where we could say, okay, well, religion and dogma provided safety, which allowed for further morality, but now we're becoming evil because we no longer have that mental safety. So we're sort of allowed these like twisted actions.
Well, okay, we could interpret this. I could interpret this because he's using the word evil, which is sort of unusual for him to be doing. That science was undermining religion. For me, it's a bit of a reach to, I know the religion thing is going to be there somewhere down the road. And maybe his use of the word evil is there for that reason. And that science was, well, we're not there yet. So this is a preliminary thought about the role of science in the world. Nicole.
I think Cambry has a really good point. She said about like when you don't have that self-safety inside of yourself, because when people are mistrustful, it's basically they're suspicious about other people. They don't trust other people, but at the same time, they don't trust themselves as well. They don't have that self-trust, their safety net. So they will have those like sabotaging behaviors, like the twisted actions, you know, as you mentioned, like, you know, they will like destroy the harmony and trust in other relationships. They will push people away. They will say things, tag people to get reactions. Those are all evil behaviors. Like using today's modern terms, they are toxic, right? They're toxic behaviors.
Okay. Audrey.
When you mentioned evil, I've read him to use that word before, and I don't remember which one we read. I was just going back looking for it, and I see at least one that's, you know, two ahead of us, so I'm not going to mention it until we get there.
It was early on. There was something
Yeah,
early on.
it was. I don't remember what it was referring to though.
I don't either, but I think the earlier aphorism was sort of trying to upend the notion of being able to determine whether something was good or something was evil, because something evil could have happened 2,000 years in the past, and here we are in the Garden of Paradise, but with that we needed that evil event to get here. It was something like that. It was a reflection on history. Barbara.
Yeah, I think what we have here is first the interlocutors, interlock, whatever. So one guy talks, first guy talks, then Nietzsche talks, then the first guy gets the last word. So that means that, to me, Nietzsche's actually not agreeing with that. And what he's saying is that there are people in society, maybe he's saying this, that feel that the demise of religion and the rise of science has eroded, now maybe Jason said this, has eroded morality to the point, or traditional morality, to the point that now anything goes. And that makes man more evil. But I don't think that Nietzsche himself would buy into that particular thought. I think he's using, like I said before, a straw man or somebody he's making up to make this into a dialogue for some reason.
Yeah, you said what I was desperately trying to get into my own head earlier about anyway, you phrased it much, much better than I did. Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you on that. Any more? All right, this will be the last one. Historia abscondita, which is translated as concealed, secret, or unknown history. And this is a bit of, he made a reference earlier in one of the earlier aphorisms about how great human beings actually reinvigorate past greatness. And now this seems to be a bit of a recapitulation of that idea that a great human being actually brings old ideas back to light. And part of what I kind of got with this and thinking of the other one as well is, I mean, perhaps the past is still essentially undiscovered. So there's, you know, okay, I'm not going to go there. And I'm obviously not going to be able to express myself well here. Nicole.
I don't know if I understand this correctly, but he said about the past actually crawling into his sunshine. So there's like a comparison between the past and the sunshine. So that there's implication where he might hint that the past actually gonna overshadow your present in some sort of ways, and you have to discover your past in order to overcome the past to become the sunshine, maybe, because now it's sunshine. But when you crawl into my sunshine, it's possibly not going to be sunshine anymore. It's going to be shadow. I think we all know, like, you know, from the psychological perspective, like when you carry things, certain things, bad experience from the past, it's going to haunt you if you don't deal with them, right? You
Yeah.
need that force to overcome yourself. You have to overcome your old identity in order to become a new one.
Okay. I didn't get that out of this. Audrey.
Well, I think I understand what Nicole's saying, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. But I saw this as, I somehow thought about it in terms of what we're going through now in the States, you know, in terms of our history, and that, you know, the great men and, you know, were they really that great and all of that. And so that's my own personal stuff involved in this. And, you know, and are we denying our history and what can come out of that? You know, like a lot of people here in Portland, you don't celebrate Columbus Day, you know, so, you know, and I thought that that made sense to me, considering what we find out, but I'm not sure he's in the same place I am here. So, because, well, if you're not allowed to talk about what I thought he meant in other books, then I guess I can just say, I put my own take on this, and I can't say it's absolutely correct, or, you know, that was his thinking, but it seems to me that we need to keep uncovering the past and not just following it as part of, you know, it's not, don't follow the same trajectory. Look at the past, see if where you want to go. Again, for me, it's about the multiplicity. That's what he talks about in his later work.
Nobody can be wrong here. I just have my own opinions, and sometimes I might express them with a certain vigor, as if I'm right and you're wrong. But I don't really intend that, so I want to clear the air of that to start with. The thought that I was trying to pull together was there's nothing new under the sun. It's all been done before in terms of human behavior. And that great men are just expressing ideas and ways of being that have already been done. And maybe it's so far in the past that nobody's ever seen it before. And so it's fresh and new now, even though it's not. It's just, it's, what does he call it? Retroactive. Yeah. And then because he's one of the great men, he brings that the power of this old idea that looks new into the modern space. Barbara.
Yeah, okay. I can see where you get that, but I was thinking more along Audrey's lines. The first thing to notice here is that it's great humans that push history forward. So it doesn't have, it's not its own process. It's not, people actually do it, and they do it in big bumps or in big increments. So there's this big guy, and here he is, and now everything looks different. And what I think is interesting about that is how a great man and his thinking will force us to reevaluate what we've considered history and add to it. So I'm sort of with Audrey. Imagine Thomas Jefferson. When I was in school, he was just some kind of saint. But now we know different about his slaveholding history and some other things too. And so we've reevaluated him. This doesn't talk about tearing down the great men. It talks about great men being the force that will continue to cause history to move forward.
Yes, yes.
And that we need,
Yes.
and we need those. So I think that's what he's referring to when he says retroactive forces, that they actually force us to look backwards and to come to new conclusions. Now, whether the new conclusions are same song, different verse, or the same, he doesn't really say. I get excited by the idea that they might be new, but I'm not sure.
Okay, well, you mentioned Thomas Jefferson, and so I want to talk about Thomas Jefferson for a minute, who was an eager proponent of democracy, more or less direct democracy. Democracy was a very old idea. There were no democracies in the modern world in 1776. And that, I think, is what Nietzsche is talking about in this aphorism. Suddenly, democracy is a thing to do. It feels new because nobody's seen it for 2,000 years, or even talked about it, probably. That's what I think he's referring to as that kind of event. Jason.
But just continue on this one. Does he in this effort? There's no democracy here, right? You think he talking about democracy?
No. He's not talking about democracy. He's talking about retroactive. Great men are actually resurgences of.
Okay, so you use the democracy as one of the examples.
He's not
Okay,
talking.
so I'm not sure he think about this way. Okay, since I think I'm allowed to reference the other book, which is Untimely Meditation, talking about.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, because I think this one is related to that one, talk about the use and the use and the disadvantage of the history for life. He's talking about historicism, and right now he take one more step, right? You think about history. We never have a complete history. Even talk about history of Julius Caesar. There's many things. You can always decide. You don't know when he go to bathroom. Does he have the love affair? Does he, how many, there's many angles you can talk about Julius Caesar or anything. So there's no, whatever history we see is human created based on what we have. So a great man being excellent, retroactive force, basically the great men look back what we have and create something from the history. So we should look at, I think, look at the history, not something control us, not something we have to follow, we have learned. It's the raw material we can use to create something, such as a great man. Okay, of course, Thomas Jefferson could be one person because he looked back, okay, democracy is a great thing. Let's do democracy. I think that's example.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Awesome. Thank you. David. You're muted, David.
Would follow with Barbara. I would suggest the term instead of revalue, reinterpret. And my Cambridge translation says in his sunshine. So it's reinterpret the past into his sunshine. So it's a reinterpretation of history based on what the latest, greatest person asserts. Yeah, so many retroactive forces are still needed. So why do we accept new interpretations of past events? Because that's what historians do. And that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Audrey.
Okay, I don't understand that. I understand that when you say his, I'm talking to David now.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And 1,000 secrets of the past crawl out of their hiding places into his sunshine. That's the Kaufman. How is it different? What is the meaning to you differently? Why is it different than all of a sudden these things crawl out of their hiding places into his sunshine? To me,
Yeah.
that's bringing a man down or something. I mean, or it could be. I mean,
Well, no,
again, they're aphorisms, and they're interesting, and it makes you think. But I don't know if he's talking about who he's talking about here. His interlocutor.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think my example is a really good one, to be honest with you. I think that Jefferson and, you know, the founders, maybe not all of them, but Hamilton had a lot of interesting things to say. And they were all borrowing from their own knowledge of Greek and Roman history. And they were shining lights to do the sunshine thing at their time. That's how come they're the founding fathers. And what they were doing was just reinterpreting ideas that had been expressed long before. And they were now owning them and promoting them. And so that was part of their sunshine. Does that help, or does that make sense?
That makes sense too. Not the one sense.
Yeah. No, I would guess that there's about, you know, we could go 100 different ways. And that's what makes this really kind of fun in a lot of ways. Jack.
Yeah, and speaking about looking at history and kind of reinterpreting or taking of ideas and so Thomas Jefferson was brought up, and Thomas Jefferson you know, used the words we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he was actually quoted by also, you know, now in our past, but his future, Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass. You know, the whole idea of we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. So it's a reevaluation of those words as in a universal form. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think that's right.
So
Okay.
reevaluation is the good word. Oh, sorry,
Oh,
Fred.
it's a wonderful word. Yes, indeed. I'm totally there. Fred, you're going to get the last word here.
Oh, it's not a very important word. I was just going to mention in that context, the reinterpretation. The one that stands out to me is I read an historical novel by Sharon Penman, The Sun and Splendor, which is about Richard III. This was quite a while back, which paints Richard III in a good light and says, actually, he's the one who was beset upon by his brothers, not the other way around. And he was actually a pretty good king who was maligned. And as I was reading it, I kept saying, no, that's not right. No, that's not right. That's not right. Because we all know from Shakespeare, you know, that Richard III was a real cad and stuff. But then at the end, she had a little appendix where she pointed out the change in interpretation that just recently arisen. Then I went back and read Josephine Tay from the 50s who said the same thing. And then I read a couple other histories, and by golly, it turns out right. My conception of Richard III, which was pretty much entirely determined by Shakespeare, who in turn was entirely determined by effectively the propaganda after the War of the Roses, was a critical example of the victors write the history, and so so completely turned upside down my understanding of Richard III centuries and centuries later. So yeah, you got to keep your mind open and to reinterpretations like that.
Well, okay then. So that's it. I don't think I'm going to be able to get to the next one in the next hour because I'm going to be a little late. Hello, somebody's in the waiting room now. So it'll probably come out tomorrow, and I know that you'll all be eager to sign up. Thank you so much for being here. We don't get very far sometimes, but I tell you, these are just terrific conversations, and I just have a great time with you guys. So, and I hope you have a great time with me too. Okay.
That's very sweet. Thank